Welcome. Good evening. Thank you for coming. I'm Michael Marsalik. I'm the program director for Montana Public Radio. And we're going to be having a couple of hours to talk about public radio tonight. We're going to do a bit of a presentation for you. And I'd like to do just a bit of a background of what our plans are for tonight and a couple of introductions, and then we'll kind of begin in earnest. After our bit of a presentation as we report back to our communities around the state, we'll definitely have some time for some announcements of coming events and things that will be happening in the radio world for sure, and also time for some feedback, and if you have questions and that kind of thing, we'd be happy to stay and talk as long as we need to about that kind of stuff too. I'd like to begin, I guess, by just introducing the members of our staff that are here. I'll just ask everybody to stand up briefly. Over here in the green is Susan Jamerson. Susan is our new membership manager. We have Morning Classics host Susan Israel. Susan, you want to stand up? Annie Gard, our children's programmer, is here. Sally Mock, news director, is right here in the second row. We also have Linda Talbot, the associate director of the Broadcast Media Center. And Kevin Mackey, our Bitterroot reporter, is standing right back here, Bitterroot Valley reporter, and been working on our poverty series. William Marcus, the director of the Broadcast Media Center, will be joining us in a few minutes as well. So, thank you. A little bit of a background. About a year ago, we started a undertaking to travel to 9 communities that we serve to get some feedback from our listeners and to talk and ask questions, mostly listen to what people thought we should be doing with the radio station in the long term, and as we entered into a project of strategic planning. We actually had 9 cities, 2 meetings in Missoula, and we went all over the western and central part of the state, just about everywhere we serve, over the course of a couple of very busy months of travel. And what we're going to do tonight is report back to you on some of that, some of what was said at those meetings and what we've done with that information, and part of the strategic planning process as well. So with that, I guess I'll just say that part of what this is all about too is it certainly is a presentation at this point, but we will welcome any comments or questions during any of this. So just let us know if you have any questions as we go through this, and certainly we can continue to talk about all things public radio as we continue. I'm going to turn it over to Linda next as we start with the presentation. Use this one, or?
So when we started on this project a year ago or so, we began by looking at our mission statement, and it had been written about 10 years before because a grant application required one. A familiar story to a lot of people at nonprofit organizations. It was a good mission statement, and I think it was still accurate, but we decided to look at it again, see if it needed to be spruced up a little bit. Do you want to do the button pushing?
Sure.
Should be 2 clicks in between slides. There we go. So we actually worked on the mission statement before, during, and after the process of the strategic planning. The staff looked at it initially and decided that they wanted to wait until we heard what our audience was telling us, because we wanted to make sure that we were responding to the audience's perception of what we ought to be doing as well. So we revisited it again after we had gone to all of those 9 town meetings. And this is what we came up with for our mission, that our station enriches the mind and the spirit, inspires a lifetime of learning, and connects communities through access to exceptional programming. So that enrich, inspire, and connect is kind of the core of the mission.
I'm going to pause at a few points during this and just point out some of the people in the pictures in case you're curious. That's the team, the broadcast team for the National Folk Festival broadcast we did last summer. On the left is Nick Spitzer. Carol Hayes is in there, people we've already introduced. Cherie Newman in the back, and on the right is Joe Brown, one of our engineers who mixed the show for us.
In addition to the mission statement, we also crafted a vision and a values statement. So for our vision, we said that we would be the essential... Not hearing?
Just get closer.
Okay. This is familiar. In the at the folk festival, in the little trailer where we were broadcasting, that was what everybody said to me before every break. Get closer to the mic. For our vision statement, the vision is to be the essential and trusted source for information and cultural programs. And for our values statement, we have at our foundation core values of independence, excellence, integrity, and innovation. On your handouts, there are more explanations of what the vision and values might encompass, but that's the core of that new statement. Okay. We serve western and central Montana, and this slide shows you what towns we visited during the strategic planning process and also the major population centers that we serve. Our broadcast terrestrial grid right now has been designed to serve those population centers and not necessarily the wide open spaces in between. So we've all experienced having signal problems as you're driving between towns and that kind of thing.
This year we are able to announce as well, we did receive construction permits from the FCC for 2 new transmitters and 1 move of a transmitter. The new ones will be in Polson on the North Hill, and also a second transmitter going up in Libby. We have a 3-year window to build those transmitters and don't know whether they'll be up, one of the summers, of course, possibly next summer or the summer after. We'll be on the air with a new signal to serve the south end of Flathead Lake better. The Libby community has had an interest in having our signal for almost a decade, and things were tied up at the FCC for some time. And then we're going to move our transmitter and translator around in the Flathead Valley, change the position of those, which we think will serve better. The main transmitter will go up to Big Mountain, and the translator will move farther south near Kalispell. So we hope that'll really change and help augment the signal in the Flathead. I don't know who's in the pictures, but they're definitely phone volunteers during Public Radio Week.
Exactly. Keep clicking on that one. As part of what we did in our strategic planning process was to also attempt to define our audience. And so we did a big exercise with lots of pages of flip charts and lots of lists of what we thought our audience was characterized by. We came up, one more click, we came up with 5, no, it went away. 5 characteristics for our audience, which is smart, loyal, engaged, caring. There's probably one more. Okay. If we're smart enough.
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
it does seem to. There you go.
There we go. The word I forgot was diverse. Smart, diverse, engaged, caring, and loyal.
Do you think that's you?
Mm-hmm.
That photograph is during our live election coverage. Edward O'Brien, Sally Mock, and our 2 analysts, Christopher Swybold and our Dennis Swybold and Christopher Musty. And we had also our reporters on the phone reporting from the field.
Part of what we did at the town meetings last fall was to ask lots of questions and take lots of notes and find out what our listeners thought about our service. And so this is sort of the encapsulation of the major points that we heard in every town, and it got to the point where it was It was very reinforced at each meeting we went to. We were hearing similar things, some different things, but there was really a core of similar comments coming through. One is that people felt like news is really our core business. If we had to make a choice, which we hope we never do, but if we had to, people said news was really what brings them and keeps them with our service. We had lots of suggestions about ways that our Montana news service can be strengthened and expanded. We also heard very strongly that our cultural and educational program is highly valued. So it was really the combination of the news and cultural programming, which is kind of the hallmark of our station, kind of an eclectic format, and that was very highly valued by all the people that attended the town meetings. Local programming is seen as a real connection, both to connect audience members to each other, to connect communities to each other, and to connect all of us to the state and the nation and the world.
That would be Garrison Keeler on stage at the Missoula show down there.
Our audience very much felt that new media, providing audio content online, maybe even video content, new ways, podcasts, new ways to get the program service, could be used both to expand access points to our service and to help develop new audiences. We found particularly with our younger audience segments, the people under 40, that was really important to them, that we provide new access points for the service. We heard over and over again that people feel like in their communities that there are lots of people that don't know about public broadcasting or what it offers. We hear that there are still problems that people have getting our signal depending on where they live. And we also heard loud and clear that people are happy with the fact that we've had secure and stable funding over the years, and they are concerned that we would be able to sustain that in the future. Okay, one more click. This slide tells you a little bit about how we stack up in the marketplace of other FM radio stations. This is from a survey of the Missoula and Hamilton area from this past spring. We have about 30% of the market out of 20-some FM stations. You can see on that chart the big, tall blue bar, that's us. All the rest of them are down much lower. We have had a history of coming out close to the top of this market, but I think it shows very strongly that there's a very large public radio audience in our listening area. And that's very unusual. Other places across the country, think it's crazy that we get 30% of our market.
We don't have survey data from the other cities that we serve. Certainly we know that there are great pockets of listenership and support throughout the rest of the state as well, but Missoula has been very much a core for us.
This slide tells you who our members are, who our donors are, and where they live. So in the Missoula-Hamilton area, over 57% of our members come from this home base kind of region for us. The Flathead is our next largest area, and we see that as an opportunity for growth, both following the population dynamics of western Montana and also our continued efforts to increase our signal coverage in that region. So we see the Flathead as an area of growth. Helena and Great Falls together are the next largest chunk, and then Butte and Dillon, southwest Montana, smaller population segments and smaller audience segments for us.
This is Beth Ann Ostein and Dr. Katie in the Studio A during Public Radio Week, talking on the air.
Okay. That's another one where you just have to keep clicking. Okay. As part of our planning process, we also looked at what were the key things that got us successfully from 1965 to now what were the keys to our stability and to our growth. So we made big long lists of all the things that had gotten us to this point. And then we thought about what would those key things be for the future. So leadership and vision is one thing that came to the top. Continuing to be innovative with technology, and particularly these days as broadcast technology and media technology seems to be changing really rapidly. It's important for us to try and stay with that curve. Keeping our programming relevant to the audience, expanding access, keeping our quality high for the programs that we offer, continuing our commitment to excellence, using new media, expanding our facility, and that could mean not just our studio at the home base, but also our transmitters and our footprint out in the community. So facility is kind of a big picture thing for us. And to continue to broaden our funding base.
Annie Gard in our record library, on the phone, talking to a child.
So in the planning process then, we determined what were the strategic areas that we needed to look at. Again, long lists were made on many sheets of flip chart paper, and we had many colored stickers to vote with, and we voted several times, and eventually came down to these 5 categories. And there was quite a negotiation about what could combine so that they could be counted in. Programming was a top concern, and that includes both our news service and our cultural programming. Technology as kind of a big picture category that would encompass all kinds of new media avenues, as well as maintaining the structure and technology that we currently have in place for terrestrial broadcasting. Promotion and marketing was an area to look at strategically, again, kind of thinking of how to address the concern that there are many people out there in the world that don't know we exist or care. Our facility, another concern, and again, in that kind of big picture way, both the studios here and all of the transmission facilities across the state. And our funding, which is what makes everything go.
We're going to give you a bit of a progress report now on some of these areas. As we mentioned, we divided our programming into 2 areas. Sally, do you want to come up and talk a little bit about news and some of the things that we've done? We've taken a number of action steps and a bit of a progress report on the news side of things.
Good evening, everyone, and really pleased to see you tonight. In news, in the last few years, we have added our Bitterroot reporter, Kevin Mackey, which I think has just been a fantastic addition to our news coverage, and want to thank Kevin for all his fine work. And then we've also just recently, in the last couple of months, added a halftime Flathead reporter, Katrin Fry, who is based in Big Fork but will be covering the Flathead Valley. And she is doing a couple of stories for us a week on every week on Tuesdays and Fridays, usually on issues of importance in the Flathead. So we're trying to expand our coverage to our wide listening audience, but also with an eye towards keeping the news of interest to all of our listeners, not just being Missoula-centric or Kalispell-centric or whatever, that hopefully most of our stories are of interest to everyone who tunes in to KUFM. And that's kind of the challenge when you have such a wide audience and a small staff. So we do focus, obviously, as those of you who listen regularly know, on issues that are more issue-oriented than event-oriented, and trying to keep our listenership engaged and hopefully interested in what the reports are, no matter where those reports are coming from. And then, of course, we have our Capitol reporter, Emily Ritter in Helena, who's going to be covering the legislature in depth for us and doing state news for us on a daily basis. And election coverage this year, in fact, I'm still getting used to life after the election. Wasn't sure there was going to be life after the election, but there is. This year we did, for the first time ever, cover the national conventions. I went to Denver to cover the Democrats, and Emily, our Capitol reporter, went to Minneapolis to cover the Republicans. And it was a thrilling experience for me as a longtime political junkie to be able to do that, and for Emily as well. And we were the only reporters from Montana news outlets who were at the national conventions. Newspapers and television stations and other radio stations did not send anyone. And so we felt like, of all the years to go, this was the one to go because of the history being made. And we're really pleased that we got to provide that coverage, and we think that it was a real value to our listeners and personally, for those of us who got to go, for Emily and I, it was a tremendous experience.
Maybe we'll do a brief pause for a show of hands on a couple of questions we've been asking people. The first, we'll back up just a little bit and ask about whether or not you have listened to and had a chance to hear some of the poverty series that Sally mentioned that Kevin Mackey has been doing. We would like to ask you somewhat formally to consider if that is something that you have perceived to be of value. We would love to get some feedback from you. Do you want to say something more about that, Linda?
Mm-hmm. That particular issues-oriented series has been funded by the Northwest Area Foundation, and we're coming to the close of the funding period with them, and we're exploring the option of renewing funding, wanting to know whether you feel like there's more to the issue that you'd want to continue hearing about. If so, the foundation tells me that letters from the audience, I forwarded one to them this week from an audience member in Dillon who was very appreciative of that series. Anyway, letters from you all mean a great deal to them in terms of their thought about giving us more funding.
If you want to just take one of the business cards here when you leave and send us an email, email's fine. Write a letter if you'd like in support of that. We hope to be able to continue that. And thank Kevin for his great work. Thank you, Kevin. Question? The question was, is the poverty series archived online? It is not in itself archived online. That's one of the things we certainly have been talking about as part of our strategic planning, and does lead me actually into one of the next questions. We did try a bit of an experiment this fall and added a large amount of content onto our website as to the election coverage. And I'd like to just see a show of hands. First of all, broadcast, who listened to our live convention reports and coverage news on the radio. Montana Public Radio's coverage, debates, all that kind of stuff, okay? Who actually downloaded and time-shifted, listened at a different time, anything off the website? Okay. All right, thank you. We'll come back to that again. Mm-hmm. You can see our kind of broad programming goal that we came up with as part of our strategic planning on the slide there, and that's a photograph taken. I'm actually sitting at the board looking through during our election coverage. We wanted to broaden our connection to our audience through our local presence, active dialogues with our listeners and connection, providing that connection to local and global communities, and continue to offer excellent content produced both locally and, of course, the national connection we have, and through National Public Radio's global and the BBC's global coverage as well. Let's see here. So on the programming side, we had a number of things. Sally was talking about some of the news steps that were taken, and I'm going to just move on to some of the things we've done also on the cultural side. We carried 13 hours live of the National Folk Festival from Butte, Montana. I'd like to see another show of hands if you listened to any of the live coverage from Butte last summer. And anyone ride the buses and actually go to Butte? Okay, a couple, yes, very good. One of the things we have been trying to do is to do outreach events, things that we can actually put us on the ground in various communities, whether it be bringing in selected shorts or other kinds of national programs, lectures, and National Folk Festival is part of that. That's Nathan and the Zydeco Cha-Chas live on the stage at the Folk Festival last summer. Some of our action steps that we've taken is that we were looking at as part of our strategic planning on the programming side is to update our local programs, continue to look for new things for our current hosts to do and new ways of expanding our current programming, as well as looking for new hosts, develop regular cultural and music programs and specials. As part of that, added a Monday night music special that is now a regular weekly event. Develop our ability to broadcast live. We were able to do some work and work with the folks at the National Folk Festival to allow us to continue for the next 2 years if we choose to do so, to broadcast again live from Butte. And we've done that in a couple other locations. We did a live broadcast a while back from the Flathead Library with the Pea Green Boat with Annie. Looking for developing more online content, podcasting. One of the things we did secure a grant to be able to podcast the Plant Detective program that's produced at Montana Public Radio. It's on over 100 stations. Do you want to add anything about that, or?
We're in the midst of trying to get that podcasting project off the ground, and what we've decided is that it also entails some revamping of our current website. So we're trying to put those two things together.
So as far as our progress report, in addition to the National Folk Festival coverage, we added another new local program. John Arvish is hosting a program every Wednesday night called What I Like About Jazz. I mentioned the Plant Detective. We're working on now a series of 8 or so training sessions and kind of ongoing development classes for our staff in everything from new media to voice work and the kinds of things that we want to be able to do behind the scenes to develop good programs. We also had a week of work and a task force developed to help us work on our music library and made a first attempt at trying to cull a few of the vinyl records out of the space and kind of clean and organize a bit. Limited space, of course, and something that's kind of an ongoing project for us. But it's been a very busy year with a lot of different things happening.
I'll take this one.
Okay.
And just to sum up one final thing about programming, each of these strategic areas has, a list of action steps and priorities and projects that we're working on in that area. But overall, when we looked at all of them together, the top 2 priorities were to be able to add to our regional news staff and to shore up the staffing for our technical department. So we're pleased that we've been able to implement the halftime reporter in the Flathead and address that number 1 priority. That was accomplished in part by grant funding from a foundation in the Flathead, and we need to look at some matching funds for that. And so now we'll move on to technology. There was a lot of concern amongst our current technical staff who really kind of, built the technical model of the station, that as we went into strategic planning, we weren't only just talking about what we wanted to add and what was new, but also that there was a strong commitment to maintaining the system that they've built. So maintaining our current delivery system is our number 1 job, actually, so that you still turn on your radio and hear us. That said, we need to also look at managing more content inside the organization and develop new ways to deliver content via new media. So maintain the old, which is a very, very large job, and look at adding new technology in the new media area. In looking at our technology department, as with much of our station, many of our staff have been with us for a very long time. And some of those folks, one by one, decide to retire or only work for us part-time, as we call it. That's what retirement means at our station. It means you're not full-time anymore, you're half-time. So we have some people in our engineering department that are looking at that horizon. And so we're looking at what we're going to do in terms of staffing in that department. So that's being addressed currently, and that's going to be kind of an ongoing project for the next couple of years, is making that transition and making it smoothly. And with the change in how media is delivered to people and everything has gone computerized over the last 10 years, what indeed are the skills and qualifications that we need in a technology department these days? It's really changed a lot over the years. So we're looking at that. The other thing that's been a big, huge project currently, and which is going to come to a close at the end of this year, is a complete upgrade and redo of our television station, Montana PBS KUFM TV. They've been working on a large, over $1 million grant to completely upgrade the TV studio, all of the behind-the-scene machines that make it work, all the cameras, everything. So that's just been a huge project. That whole studio has been torn apart for an entire year, and it's in the process of getting put back together and finalized. Looking at upgrading our website is also an action step that we're working on, and we're still in the planning phases of that. Streaming is kind of the number one request we get from the public. Streaming means being able to listen to our real-time broadcast on a computer, okay? And literally in emails and on the telephone, we must get 5 to 7 requests per week for streaming. One of the reasons we have never done streaming involves copyright issues and royalty payments and some of those kinds of things. The technology of it has gotten quite simple. The legality of it is very murky. Right now, NPR is in negotiations with the Recording Industry of America to try to establish a rate structure for the royalty payments specifically for non-commercial and public stations. Currently, the regulations are kind of one size fits all for commercial stations or non-commercial, and it would be kind of prohibitively expensive for most non-commercial stations to comply with it. So we're looking forward to those negotiations getting wrapped up at some point, and once they come to a conclusion, we'll be able to decide if we can go ahead and be able to afford streaming. We would really like to.
Could you comment on your transmission locally upgrades? So my point is, I'd like to be able to get stronger signal anywhere I am with my car or in my bathroom or my...
You mean in Missoula specifically?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. That's being looked at, and I'm not the engineer, but my understanding is that they're looking at signal power as one of the things that might help make that better.
There's two things. Can I jump in? There's
Yeah.
two things that have happened. There is a new digital transmitter that went on for Missoula. 89.1 FM is a new transmitter now that will allow us potentially to broadcast in high definition HD radio. It has that potential. There are some problems with that in the sense that the rest of the system wouldn't have HD, so if we started to talk about it or add additional content and those kinds of things, that would be exclusive to Missoula, which would be, I think, somewhat problematic for the rest of the system. So there are some questions there. There was a hope, I think, that there would be a bit of a increase in the quality of the coverage with the new transmitter and associated technology. There's also talk, and I think that's what Linda was referring to, about what to do potentially to boost the power of 91.5, the translator that broadcast to North Missoula and the Rattlesnake Valley. And if that could be boosted, that would really help, I think. And there are pockets, as probably all of you know, all over Missoula and certain places where the signal's just pretty bad. So.
In addition, in the technology area, as Michael mentioned earlier, we've got permission to build a new transmitter in Polson, to put one in Libby, and to do kind of an upgrade plan for the Flathead area in general. So that's going to be a project coming up in the next 2 to 3 years. That's going to be our next big push. Probably with that project also, we're going to be looking at a large federal grant, and we may ask for some money to upgrade some of our studio equipment in the radio plant here in Missoula as well.
The photograph is of, on the right-hand side, is of Olga Lincoln, I think is her last name, of a listener from Polson, and that's Katrin Fry, our new Flathead reporter, with her there, and another
Jeff and Tammy Houghton.
Jeff and Tammy Hutton in the other photograph, yeah.
Okay, promotion and marketing. The big goal for this area is to gain more listeners and viewers and turn them into donors by letting people who know who we are and what we offer and where to find us.
That's Nick Spitzer, the host of American Roots, who is with us at the National Folk Festival. And he and I are on the main stage there.
In this area, because we broadcast to such a large portion of the state, and we serve so many communities, a marketing budget for us has always been a quandary because it's very hard to come up with a really large marketing budget, and it's hard to do a lot regionally with a small marketing budget. So we've opted for doing a lot on our own air, which is why you all know about us and other folks do, but people that don't necessarily listen, how do you get them to try you? So we're going to try and put together a task force with some people that know about regional marketing and see what we can come up with as a plan that will be affordable and achievable. One of the new things we are trying is communicating with our audience members by email, and we started that this summer, and I think that's been pretty successful. We're sending out an email newsletter roughly every 2 weeks. You may get an email communication from us about things like this meeting in addition to that. But I think that the email's been a nice way for us to be able to talk with you all a little more frequently, a little more personally, and provide you some timely reminders about, maybe some interesting programs that are coming up as well.
Can we pause for a show of hands? Who gets the email newsletters that we send out in the room? Okay, great. Thank you. If you want to sign up for those, just make sure your name and email's on that list, and we'll send them out.
We get some email communications. Why don't we get an email newsletter?
I don't know. The question was, if you get some.
No?
I got this one, but I've not gotten any others.
Very interesting. We'll have
Yeah.
to check that out.
We'll look into that. There was a question of that before as well. Yeah.
I wonder about the character of email, whether some of us, when you're sending them to us and we're not getting them because they're bouncing.
Mm-hmm.
It could be that. It could be that your email service provider is, sending ours into the spam pile. That's possible as well.
I was concerned back to an early circle graph about the 25 and older population. What are you doing to move Annie's listeners into their teens and early 20s?
The question is, in looking at our population and of our audience, what ages they are, she's wondering, how are we moving our children listeners, our kids that listen to the Pea Green Boat, through their teens and into their 20s and to become adult listeners with us? There's a real gap.
Some Hannah Montana. Right.
Yeah.
At a certain age, you can tell them they can stay up after 11 on Saturday nights and tune into City Limits.
Yeah.
I grew up listening to NPR, not the Pea Green Boat, because I'm not from around here. But I don't feel like you really need to target that specific audience, because the news and the cultural programming is interesting enough and exciting enough for people of all ages that I don't think you need to have rock programs or something like that to get teens to listen.
Yeah.
In high school and middle school, I loved listening just because it was the news and it was a unique cultural program on NPR.
And we think that, certainly now that there are at least multiple generations of Pea Green Boat listeners that have grown up and now have their kids listening and that kind of thing. We know that we lose the kids in that teen years, that they just gravitate to other things. And nowadays, don't even listen to the radio a lot. But that hopefully come back. And if those early habits of public radio listening are there, then hopefully they'll come back to public radio later. We realize that we can't please every group, obviously, and that age group is a tough one, I think. So.
Yeah. It was interesting when we had our Missoula meetings last year, and we specifically convened an extra meeting for people under 40 because we hadn't really heard much from them. And they very much told us that they didn't want us to change who we were to attract the 20-somethings. So I think, what we're hearing very strongly from all of our audience is to, be the best us we can be, and in this marketing and promotion work, to look at, blowing our own horn a little bit better than we have been in terms of making a doorway for people to come in. And as you were saying, most people are thinking that it's going to be the news service that's going to be the entry point for new listeners and younger listeners.
I think possibly along those lines, something I want to say is that NPR is my #1 news source, which, as you said, goes for a lot of people. And that being said, I think, when you think about 20-somethings or your average job being a 9-to-5 job, somebody gets up at 7:30 in the morning to go to their 9 o'clock job. They have a half an hour of news in the morning. And so if you think of all the college students, how many of them are getting up before 8 o'clock in the morning? They're missing out on the news. And what I do, I get up and one of my jobs starts at 8, the other starts at 9. My job that starts at 9, I get up and I turn on NPR, I go to their programming, and I listen to it on my computer. And so that gives me loyalty to NPR as opposed to MTPR. And so I think you're losing out on that loyalty of people who like NPR, they like the programming. They're missing out. What I miss out on by doing that is the local programming and the Montana news, which I would love to hear. And you're losing out on the loyalty of those listeners to your station. So I think to get younger people and more people listening to the program, I think you need to move the news program from starting at 4:30 in the morning, when you're probably not going to get that many news listeners, up and end the news at 9 o'clock. You'll get a lot more people.
Yeah.
You want a show of hands? News till 9? Wow. Okie doke.
It's been obviously a compromise issue for so many years, both that and other things throughout our schedule. I'm certainly the one that gets most of those phone calls from people that have moved to our listening area and can't understand why we have children's programming on at 4 o'clock or whatever it might be. So, but we're always thinking about these things and looking into those kind of big questions as well. It's really good to get that feedback, so thank you.
Last thing on marketing, we're kind of working right now on a new concept for a look for Montana Public Radio, so that our newsletter, our printed one, and our email one, and our website, and our stationery all kind of look alike. So we're working on that as well. Okay.
That photograph is of Cherie Newman sitting in our control room. She's the All Things Considered local host and the producer of The Right Question. And I also want to mention Joan Richard joined us, who's one of our longtime producers of so many programs, I don't think I could even name them. So in the subject area of facility, the goal is to provide accommodations for staff, continued growth and technology for our service. This actually has changed some. Our original goal talked about, as we came out of the strategic planning, the potential for a kind of a major building expansion and some other major things that we identified would be a need. And we've now modified that goal to basically say that we'll provide the needed accommodation for staff and continued growth in technology in our service. We do still have a lot of needs. As I mentioned the library earlier, we have people with office desks set up in studios and those kinds of things. We certainly have been short on space since the building was built in 1984. Having said that, we were able to repurpose about a little over 1,000 square feet of space from the students when the journalism school opened on campus. And I think 9 or 10 people were given offices. We expanded our front office space, and that process of moving some people, some of our engineering staff actually out of kind of a technical storage space into a real office and things like that has helped and really made a step in the right direction. We think we have certainly more to look at over time as we continue to expand and look at what to do with our facility. I think that was Annie. Was that Halloween, Annie?
I just think the teenagers should.
Our main goal, if you will, and priorities under a facility is to continue to take care of our infrastructure, our services that we have. We have an ongoing expansion, as Linda mentioned, on the television side, digital technology, digital studios going in now. That process is underway. Maintaining our existing transmitters, I mentioned the new ones going up, and continuing to provide adequate work areas for our staff. So looking at a needs assessment, an upgrade plan, feasibility study, all those things are potential for as we look at ways to expand our facility. And that really means for us facilities, both the building, the studios, all the things that we have here in Missoula, as well as the transmitters around the state. On the lower left, that's John Myers, longtime host of Late Night and the Folk Show.
Okay. So for the funding area, our goal is to expand our funding in a realistic way so that we can meet the revenue needs for the programming, the facility, and the technology. We did a pretty comprehensive budget assessment in the summer and looked at building our fundraising plan for this fiscal year, which started July 1st, goes till the end of June. And we added quite a bit in there for new initiatives. We added money in for the new news staff in the Flathead. We're trying to build a cushion for our technical department in terms of staff as well. In addition to that, we've got a website that needs to be upgraded, and we've got a couple of projects we'd like to do. So we added quite a bit to the budget, and we're trying not to have it all come out of Pledge Week. So one of the things we did was develop a new fundraising activity, which you all probably heard about, our eco-transport raffle that we just completed. And that came from the revenue budget in a line item that said, new revenue. We tried to think of a new revenue stream that would be broadly appealing, that might entice folks that normally might not donate to us to give, and that might be something that could grow in the future. We're very pleased with the outcome of the raffle for this first time, especially given that the economy got very shaky in October, and that was the final month of it. So we had hoped to sell somewhere in the vicinity of 1,200 entries for the raffle, and we came within, I think, 14 of getting to that goal. So we were very, very pleased with the outcome, and all the people that won the prizes are very happy too.
Who is the winner?
In this picture, that's Peggy Crawford, who was the grand prize winner of the Prius, which we drove to her place of business. She owns a business called The Directory, which is a mailing service here in Missoula. She works with lots of nonprofits, and we're all very pleased that she was our prize winner. So we drove the car over there on a very rainy day and delivered it. And the first thing she wanted to do was look under the hood and see what the hybrid engine looked like. So we're crafting a very ambitious fundraising plan. In addition to that new revenue category, we also want to look at beginning to lay the groundwork for a major gifts program as part of our ongoing fundraising activities. I'm going to be trying to put together a philanthropy task force here pretty soon to help me with that. In addition, we looked at long-term stability for the station and decided that we really need to put some major effort into building our endowment, and that's one way that we will be able to provide long-term stability for the station, both to help with staffing needs as we have them, but also so that we can have the opportunity to move quickly with new technologies and new media as things change. You know, over the life of this station, for the most part, the technology was very, very stable for about 35 years. And now it's changing rapidly, and so our philosophy of hanging back, waiting to see what works for everybody else, and then implementing it 5 years later is no longer okay. So we need to be able to shift as things shift in the marketplace and in the new media world. So we'll also be starting to make a feasibility study for building our endowment. So that's the fundraising plan. And that's the end of our slideshow.
So before we move to the next thing, certainly pause if anybody has any questions on any of those subject areas or in general at this point. What we'll do next is we'll do a few announcements and certainly just kind of open up a bit of a forum to talk all things public radio. Anybody have any pressing questions on the presentation so far? Yes.
Well, I have a question. I'm in what that, as you called it, the pocket. I tune in on 91.5 and quite often, I mean, it seems quite often without any warning, the signal's just gone, especially when it's windy.
The question is about the signal from our translator 91.5 and that it has been unreliable.
Yeah, we really appreciate hearing from people when they have specific experiences. One of the funny things I remember talking with Doug Drader, one of our engineers. He's the guy that actually goes up to the top of all the mountains and works on the equipment, and talked about how valuable it is to actually hear from people what's happening at your location. It really helps with troubleshooting. So certainly if you're experiencing something and you notice that it only seems to be happening on windy days at 43 degrees or whatever, call us and we can certainly look into that. I know that I don't know that there's been a regular reoccurring problem with 91.5, but I know that, as I mentioned earlier, that there are, we're looking at that translator and what could potentially be done in the future.
We did over the summer and the fall, as we were working on installing the new transmitter for Missoula, there were periodic times where the signal was coming and going, and that could also have affected the 91.5 transmitter or translator because they're tied together.
Is Libby getting a full transmitter?
Yes. Libby has a group of people that actually fundraised a sum of money a long time ago and has had it sitting in a bank account. And the licensing was frozen for a long time at the FCC. And now that that's been moving, we were granted that building permit to put that new transmitter up. Yeah. The translators are actually not protected in the same way as a full transmitter is, in terms of another station could come in and want the frequency and those kind of things. So that's why we've actually done transmitters that we will then manage. A couple announcements I'll make, and then certainly we can continue and talk. We have a few things coming up that I wanted to mention. One thing we're going to be part of is that StoryCorps, the National Oral History Project that's been touring the country now for 4 years and has booths, reports, or at least excerpts on Morning Edition every Friday morning. They're launching with NPR and with Montana Public Radio and member stations all around the country the day after Thanksgiving as the first annual, they hope, National Day of Listening. And you'll be hearing a lot on our air starting tomorrow about this to remind people to participate. And what it is just basically an opportunity when people gather already with loved ones and relatives to record something with the people that you are gathered with. And you can do it in any way. Dave Isay, the creator of StoryCorps, talked about how most people have some kind of recording equipment available, whether it be a video camera or a cassette player or some kind of a recording device, pen and paper. Do something to record those loved ones while you gather. And so this is an effort nationwide that we'll begin talking about. Next week on our air, we'll be airing a few excerpts from StoryCorps and possibly even a couple of new things next week, and talking about that. So encourage you to participate in any way that you can. There's a wonderful resource listing things you can do, the question generator, which is a really wonderful thing that StoryCorps has to help come up with, gosh, what are those great questions that I could ask my mother or my father or my grandmother? And that question generator is on a link. It's at our homepage now, so if you go to mtpr.org, it'll take you right to nationaldayoflistening.org, and that has all sorts of resources. So I would just encourage you as listeners to do something if you'd like, and spread the word. Also want to mention, we talked about the National Folk Festival and doing outreach events. We're planning on bringing selected shorts back to Montana next fall, and planning on going to Whitefish this time in October of 2009. Wanted to also mention that I have, you probably have heard some of your fellow Missoulians and people from around the state voicing the legal IDs that we do every hour by law, 24 hours a day. It's been really great to have the voices of people that listen to the service and people from our communities voice those instead of listening to us read those same call letters every hour. So if you would like to voice a legal ID for the radio station and perhaps talk about what in Missoula you like, what makes it so special about living in this community, something that you'd like to share with the rest of Montana perhaps, or if you'd like to just talk about the service, we're interested in developing more of these and just putting more voices on the air. So I've got a whole stack of these sheets here, and I would encourage you to take one. If you have somebody you know, what's happened in a few communities is I passed some sheets out in Helena, and somebody took one and just said, oh, I know the person who has the great voice that everybody knows, which would be so great to do a legal ID. And what we'll do is we'll just follow up. You can send this in, you can fill it out tonight, leave it, or send it back to us, and we'll follow up and bring you into the studio at some time and record your voice, put you on the radio. So thank you for that. If you'd like to take one of those, please do. Also mention, we have a number of special programming things happening over the course of the holiday season, starting with a couple of things I just want to mention since I've got an audience of public radio fans here. The day after Thanksgiving, the National Day of Listening, we're going to air the Third Coast radio broadcast again. And what it is the Third Coast Festival is a Chicago-based public radio group that has a huge competition, global competition every year for radio documentaries, short form, long form, everything. And then they award a number of really great new documentaries, the prizes, and they put together a 2-hour show of the best of public radio for this year. And we're going to air that 2-hour special on the day after Thanksgiving. So tune in for that if you want at 1 o'clock. We also have all sorts of holiday programming. We're going to have our holiday schedule actually mailing out to many of you over the next week. It'll probably hit the streets. And you can also check the website soon. But we have some really wonderful Thanksgiving programs again, Hanukkah programs, Christmas, a number of things, New Year's. So lots of things coming up in terms of special programs over the holidays.
I want to mention also for those of you who are viewers of Montana PBS, we're having a special Montana PBS event in Missoula on December the 8th, which is a Monday evening, here on campus. Mark Shields, who is a political analyst for the NewsHour with Jim Lehrer, will be here to give a free public lecture. And that'll be at the University Theater at 7:30. And we're also sending that out with our end-of-the-year mailing and our holiday program schedule, so you'll have a reminder about that. But we're excited to be able to bring Mark here and get his take on politics and the changing media landscape. And it's part of an annual series of lectures that Montana PBS has been putting on and alternating locations between Bozeman and Missoula. So it's Missoula's turn this year. Speaking of PBS, I want to welcome William Marcus to the meeting, who has just come from a PBS shoot.
Thanks. it's odd to be introduced as the PBS guy, but this event is something that we've looked forward to since we met with a group of people in Missoula last year. The whole strategic planning process that Linda has led and that Michael and I have been involved in has included some amazing meetings with people who are really important supporters of this service. And to look out tonight and see so many of you, so many people who work at Montana Public Radio or people who have supported us for years is a great experience. You know, we are a success largely because of your support and people like you. So we wanted to come back after last year of talking to people to report back on what we found in our strategic plan. And I know I'm probably going over what they've said so far, but to sit in the audience and listen to it was an interesting experience as well. These guys know their job really well, and it's my pleasure to work with them. And I look forward now to a discussion about public radio and what it means to you, what questions you have for us, because that's also an important part of this process. Last year, we went and listened, and this year we wanted to report back, but we know that an important part of this is also listening to you tonight. So let's move on to that portion of the meeting.
Yeah, just would encourage you to get up, move around a little bit if you want. Another refreshment run. If you need to use a restroom, just go ahead, but we'll just continue on with questions. Anything you want to talk about public radio? Go for it. Anybody have a question? Back there, yes. Well, why don't we just repeat the questions, and then if that's...
Well, I guess the first thing I wanted to say is I consider public radio one of my most pleasurable and wholesome addictions. Thank you for keeping it so wholesome as an addiction. The other thing I think one of the first things that it often says on the radio is that Montana Public Radio is a public service in the University of Montana. And I wonder to what extent it's integrated into the university's teaching mission, for instance. So I was always curious as to what extent KUFM or PBS use student interns to working with reporters, your technology people, your programming people, your fundraising people, your marketing people. These are, I think, would be a great and helpful resource, and it'd be a big benefit to the students to get that experience as well. Now you're probably going to tell me, yeah, we already do that.
We're actually in the process of trying to do that more. Oftentimes in past years, we've had maybe one student helper in the fundraising office. In the news department, Sally always has the news anchors for the evening. Montana Evening Edition are always students from the journalism program. So that's valuable career experience for those fortunate kids. This year, we had a great crop of student applicants, and between our business office and the fundraising office, we hired 4 students to help us. As a matter of fact, Max, a freshman, created this PowerPoint presentation and had fun making everything spin and turn. But, you know, it wasn't something that I would have created, and it's been very helpful at these meetings and very, very nice. So what we're finding is that our student employees are bringing a lot of good skills with them when they walk in the door. So they're not only helping with things like the PowerPoint, they're helping us generate the email newsletters and track responses when you send things back to us. They're helping us with our database and some data entry kind of things. So we're trying to utilize them more to help us get our work plan done. I think there's always more room for us to make partnerships with students at the campus and to use them more. What you run into, though, as with any kind of supervision, you know, it takes time to make that a productive experience for both sides. So we have to balance how much time it takes on our part to help them learn the work as opposed to, you know, how fast we could do it on our own.
Can I say something about that, Linda, too? With the marketing, we were kind of looking at guerrilla marketing and what can we do inexpensively or free or most effectively. And so the students have been wonderful in terms of going to live events And so if you know of any events that would be good for us to have a presence, we will happily, pay the $20 to get a table or whatever, and we are trying to schedule those students at everything. So they were out to dinner, out to lunch, the farmer's market, all that kind of stuff. And we feel like that's a really good way to get our face out there, to get some young people out there, staffers stop by as well. But if you have any ideas, please, my business card is up here, send it to me, and we'll get it in the schedule and we'll get the students there.
And the other portion of Montana PBS and Montana Public Radio that is part of the curriculum, if you watch Montana Journal or Made in Montana or the Montana PBS News Briefs, those are all students who are doing that work under an executive producer who's a faculty person. But they're doing all the research, all the writing, all the shooting and editing. In the 270 class, I think students do reports for Montana Evening Edition as well. There was just a great one on the other night. So all that student work in the radio TV department also ends up on the air on public radio and television.
I was just going to say, I've been here for 25 years listening to KUFM, and I didn't know that. And it would be great if we could figure out how to get that out to a greater extent. And do you do things with KGBA? Maybe put the word out on KGBA about the student involvement in KUFM, and that might interest students listening to KGBA to switch over and listen to some programs on KUFM that are made by students. They might get excited about that. I was going to encourage the use of folk reporters of all ages, youth reporters as well as senior reporters and things of that sort for little short things.
Susan's coming with a microphone.
It was the top row and now the bottom row.
Thank you. Years ago, we used to talk about lectures, faculty lectures, or rebroadcasting evening lectures. Has anything developed in that line?
We have certainly had an interest, and certainly with the Friday specials slot that we have now on 1 o'clock on Fridays, I've been airing some of those. Some things, the more national things like the Press Club just stopped distributing. And then for local lectures, things recorded on campus, there are sometimes rights issues. For example, we've had an interest in carrying most of the President's Lecture Series here on campus, and I've certainly had requests from people that don't live in Missoula to hear those. And more and more it's becoming difficult. The publishers and sometimes the guests themselves don't allow broadcast or rebroadcast of those, and that was the case with a number of the lectures this year. What I've done is we've talked in our kind of production team about let's look for good things that would make good radio. So I'm kind of open to anything to consider. It's a matter of do we have the resources and somebody to go tape it, and would it translate good to radio, and could we get the rights to broadcast it? But I think some of those can be very interesting, and we have a spot every week now for things like that.
Thanks. I have a somewhat long opening to my question, and I want to echo the voice of the young woman who just left and the other young woman in the back who is happy about her wholesome addiction to public radio. I'm also a huge fan, but I'm very worried as I look around the room that there aren't many people like me or of my age in the room, and I'm worried for you that you might be losing us and you might not get us back, because we're so used to listening now to what we want when we want, and through our computers or through my computer, I'll say, and so I do the same. I do the same as the young woman. I go to npr.org, listen to what I want, and then when I've exhausted that, I try and find what I want on mtpr.org, but so often I have trouble finding it, and I even gasp. Go to KQED in San Francisco and KU something out of Seattle, because their pages are very user-friendly, and I'd love to see mtpr.org have very straightforward user friendliness with limited necessary clicking to try and get from page to page. And the use of drop-down menus in particular would, I think, be really helpful to just see the list of programs so that I can just go straight there. And also have a good search engine so I can figure out if I can go back and find things that I heard but didn't know what they were. So I'm curious to know what your plans are for upgrading. I suspect that might be expensive. And I want to support you in doing that. And I think chances are good if people my age are think like I do, which they may or may not, that you might get more members. And I know that I would support you greatly in that effort if I knew that that was forthcoming.
Thank you for that. I'm sure we all would love to comment on that in some way. I'll just say this is something certainly that our industry has been looking at. Some stations have been really aggressive with having an online presence, and we have not been. And as Linda mentioned earlier, we're certainly aware of that. We're hearing about it more and more from our listeners. Requests, as Linda mentioned, for streaming and other things coming in more and more. I think it's important that we let you know that it is our intention to continue to try to evolve and do what we need to do. When I travel and go to the program directors conference and that kind of thing and meet with colleagues all over the country, this is something that stations are talking about all the time. The technology is moving really fast. Internet radio, Wi-Fi everywhere, podcasting, downloading, having streaming at your fingertips in your car. They're talking about all these things, of course, satellite radio and other things, as being competition for us. So one of the things that we have talked about and continue to talk about is, well, how can we remain relevant and important? And we know that our local content, our local news, our local cultural programming and programs that we produce that you can't get anywhere else will continue to be important. We just got to figure out multiple platforms to get them to people. And so that is something we're definitely going to continue to look at and try to address. I'm not going to give you a date like, oh, we're going to turn on streaming on X date or anything like that, but we definitely are starting to talk about it. As Linda mentioned too, we have some podcasting in the works, at least some exploration now on how we can get some of our local programs distributed that way too. So thank you for that feedback.
Just one more thing on the website. We have right now an internal committee that's trying to establish priorities for how we want to change the website. And I'd be very interested in keeping in touch with you, because the next thing we want to do is have a users group from outside the station to help advise us about how we're developing that design so that it is user-friendly and accessible and you can find the things you want to look for. Because I know one of the deficiencies about our site right now is that there's actually a lot of content there, but it's really hard to find. Yeah.
And NPR is also moving pretty rapidly, even past the point where they are right now, to improve their web presence. Part of that will involve station content. And that's one thing we've struggled with, is a place to put our content where it would be readily accessible without kind of redrawing our entire map right now. If we can place stuff there, then it could be accessible to anyone, anywhere. The question of, do you have to come to us to be able to listen to a national program that you might find at KQED? What I would like to happen is that Montana Public Radio, and PBS for that matter, be the site where people come to first to then find a program. Even if we don't broadcast it, I think that it's important that people see us as a source where they can find the things they need. But I also think that Montana Public Radio is positioned well to keep people coming to us, because we have content that people can get nowhere else. You could go to any public radio station in the country and download one of the national shows, or go directly to that show and download it. You have to come to us for the Pea Green Boat, for instance. So those kinds of things, and if we can manage to figure out how to podcast the Pea Green Boat with all the rights problems and everything else, then we really will have unique content that people can get only from us.
Do you have any sort of timeline for that? I know I don't want to nail you down to something really specific, but are we talking 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years?
Yeah. Well, yeah, we know that we can't really wait. I mean, things are moving too quickly to drag this out. And as Linda mentioned earlier, you know, the model was that we could take our time with these kinds of evolving technologies because it really wasn't moving very fast until the last 3 or 4 years. You know, it was only 4 years ago, maybe 5 now, that you needed us to hear the program This American Life. You could not hear that program unless you turned on public radio on Tuesday night. Most people that listen to the show now, or you know, a huge percentage of people that listen to the show listen to it time shifted, or sometimes their local station broadcast. Who listens to the podcast of This American Life? Anybody in the audience? A few out there. Okay. Who has the microphone? All right.
Oh, I have the mic.
Go ahead.
I don't understand why KUFM doesn't have a program like Diane Rehm, or why don't you purchase Diane Rehm, or Here and Now, Talk of the Nation, Fresh Air, all, you know. Are they too expensive?
Sure. Well, they do cost. Yeah, they do cost a lot of money. And public radio stations 5-6 years ago were encouraged to become primarily news talk stations. And because of that, NPR, American Public Media, and others started to produce a lot of public affairs talk shows, the Diane Rehm Show, Here and Now. We've always wanted a different mix than that. And if you listen to most public radio stations in the country, they are either classical music with news or jazz with news. Very few of them have the kind of the old-fashioned eclectic mix that Montana Public Radio has. Some of the reaction we've gotten in our meetings, the people have told us, well, you haven't changed in 20 years. You know, there are new shows out there that I want to be able to hear. And it has been a difficult decision to make. And as I just said, I think that because we have maintained a certain amount of local commitment and local programming, so we have the folk show on Tuesday afternoon instead of Talk of the Nation. We have on Thursday afternoon the jazz show instead of Talk of the Nation and Here and Now. I believe that we will remain a source where people will tune to us for those shows and go online, in podcasts or whatever, or to satellite radio to listen to the national shows. People disagree with that. They think that public radio should be providing information. Others think that we should be providing more on the cultural music side. It has been a constant struggle for us to try to find where that middle line is. Yeah, I wish we had another service so that we could put all of those news and talk shows on the air and make them available.
See, the problem, like in the Flathead, because I have a place up there on the lake, is that they're not on the site of a liberal arts, flagship liberal arts school. That's a dead area up there. And they need talk radio up there. They really need information. And I just think it's a mistake not providing content. We're so isolated. When I came to teach here 53 years ago, they showed me my first grade classroom, and then I said, where's the library? They didn't have libraries in schools. So Montana has to be a little bit careful not to isolate itself.
Well, I would just want to add one more thing to this topic, and that is, you know, William mentioned, wouldn't it be great to have additional ways of, you know, a separate stream, for example, or another way of providing more content? Yeah, that may be coming in some different ways, you know. Using our website as a portal, getting to these different programs. We had someone who is a huge fan of Talk of the Nation in Butte who said to us at a meeting month and a half ago, I'm really glad you don't carry Talk of the Nation. I listen to it every day. but I listen to it online at a time which works for me. And I'm glad you carry the programs that you carry and that you don't spend the money to carry that program and preempt your local programs to put it on the air. So I think there's that balance, and I think it's an ongoing issue. You know, some stations have multiple channels, two FMs and an AM in a couple of places like that. Seems like a crazy amount of programming to do, but could be pretty neat. Let's pass the mic again. Okay. 1 second, we're going to do one over here first, and then we'll come to you.
Hi, thanks. I grew up listening to public radio in Toledo, Ohio. I remember in my 5th grade classroom, we very carefully tuned this new thing called an FM receiver to the University of Toledo to listen to, and it was all educational programming back then. There were lectures, and it was just boring as all get out. But we had integrated assignments in the classroom. As we expand out to other communities, I wonder about being able to, with that teenage population and with some of the classes in high schools, reach out with a curriculum approach to the schools in much the same way that Pea Green Boat has a lot of educational material. It's a lot of fun. But when Sam comes on and talks about bugs and snakes and or whoever does all that, you know, there's a lot of good information. I like our eclecticism. I think we're one of the most unique things in the world. When I travel to other communities, I get bored really quickly listening to their snooze fest of all talk and no interruption for other kind of programming. So I like the going around the wheel. Last thing. Oh, it's maybe an idea for Pea Green Boat to market by going into those communities, collecting some kids, maybe going so far as to giving them the microphone like NPR does with, I forget the name of the show.
Like youth radio? Or,
yeah, and they go, and it has to be edited, of course, but what if the high school in Libby, the Eagles, you know, got a chance to talk about what it's like to be an Eagle in Libby, Montana, so that kids in Missoula, Montana could hear that, and it's advertised, promoted in the schools, and they begin to connect. Just an idea for networking. Or to put Pea Green Boat on the floor.
Can we pass the mic over here next? And thank you. 1 second.
Thanks. William, just suppose you're wrong for a moment. I look around here, there are 40 people here, and what is it, just under 60,000 live in Missoula, and I've come in 60 miles to this meeting. There are not enough people here. There are not enough people who are using this forum for ideas for you. Most of these people here, me included, of course, are grey-haired, but I wondered whether they are not your core of listeners, and that they really need to be changed. You need to go to another group, not people that are content at 8 o'clock to switch on for classical music. Those people who you want to get hold of, turn on perhaps public radio, hear classical music of various types, and I'm a lover of that music too, and they turn off, and maybe you've lost them forever. They want news at this time. This young lady who left, unfortunately, was absolutely right. The news program should extend at least until 9 o'clock. When I've got 2 pages of comment here about public radio that I've put aside to try and say something that is a burden for this community. I hear people who are giving their money at the fundraising events, and they read. We've just had $50 from Dr. Jones of Kalispell, and he would like more news. And the next person, he would like more news. People do want news. It was the first thing on your thing. I don't think that classical music is the thing to have at the morning, or despite the man that comes on and said it sets him up for the day. Well, of course, it probably does, but there's 99 other people out of the 100 who actually want to hear what is going on in the world and don't want to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning or even 6 o'clock in the morning, and certainly don't want to be up at 2 a.m. to listen to the BBC World Service. I mean, that is the most crass thing that I've ever come across. It's a waste of anybody's money. Insomniacs, and people on night work, of course, but I don't think most of those want to listen to the BBC anyhow. And I was brought up on radio. I mean, I was born a long time before television. I listened to radio of all types. I mean, it was just wonderful. It was so diverse. It was local and it was national, international, and teaching programs, all sorts of things. So I love radio. The first thing I did practically when I arrived in the States 30 years ago, I supported public radio. I couldn't believe that there wasn't public radio for free. And I've always supported it. But you've really got to change. My last paragraph here was, I've got to put my cheater's glasses on here.
Thank you.
Keep those great programs produced in Missoula, like Good Food Guys. How about a little more time for them, by the way? And keep them at the same time. Don't fool around with the listeners. Please get us a few more national programs, like In the Media, which we really appreciate. It's a great addition to the programming. How about Talk of the Nation? We've killed that one. Day by Day, Democracy Now!, Marketplace, National Press Club, To the Best of Our Knowledge, Weekend America, and some funnies. What do you know? Wait, wait, don't tell me. There are lots of them out there. I support Montana Public Radio, and it's my first sentence. In our household, a Montana Public Radio is stuck on the dial. We don't listen to anything else, but we do need a few changes. And we really do need you to think that this audience is not the only audience out. 40 people here tonight. That's not enough for public radio. Public radio is the tool to bring people into the community, and I think we all believe here in the community. I mean, this is a great community, and I've lived in many. It's a wonderful place to live, but the public radio is doing the public a disservice by being outmoded and outdated and a little bit too cozy. I mean, you're very great at cottage industry, but we really need a little bit more zap, and if you have to go out for more than a week a year, perhaps you have to go out for 2 weeks to get more money, but I really think it needs to be smartened up.
I mean, one of the things I like most about these meetings and about what you had to say is what you said at the beginning of the page, is that despite all of that, you still listen to us every day. And I think that the passion and the commitment that people have to this service is extraordinary. And because of that, it is an extraordinary burden to those of us who work here to try to cover all the bases that we can. And I happen to be a news junkie myself. And when I'm in Helena, often I will be listening to Yellowstone Public Radio for Morning Edition until 9 o'clock. That doesn't mean that I necessarily believe that Montana Public Radio should do that. I think that the ideal thing we need to look at are the possibilities that are coming along in HD radio, where you do have the chance for a second channel, so that people will have a choice to listen to news and information. But I'm not going to say that I think that news is more important than the Third Symphony of Henry Goretzky that we played this morning. I just can't cut that baby in half. But it is something that but it is something that we take very seriously. And a comment like yours is one that I think will drive me to look for more solutions, to look for ways that we can make those services available to people who need them. And I believe Montana does need more news and information, more connections to what's going on in the world. And we have this single conduit into which we need to press too many things at the moment. But I think these meetings are a part of that process. And I welcome your participation, and I'm very glad that you came tonight.
I have a note from my neighbor who he asked me to deliver it, so it's a sort of second breath here. He says, last point, hot from a neighbor who now is so fed up with Montana Public Radio's ability to put out good program. He streams from the net and says, look at the listeners they're losing. Do you want to lose more listeners who need better radio? I mean, I heard you say that you think that Gretzky is more interesting than the news. Well, you as personally, you said that was a decision that was made. Well, it is, of course. But we could listen to it at 7 o'clock at night, but we can't miss that news first thing in the morning. That's the problem.
Well, let me just offer one comment. That's okay. Let me offer a comment. Certainly, you know, my focus every day is on programming, and I'm the one that gets most of these calls when they come directly to the station. Are we underserving certain populations because of the way our radio station is set up? Absolutely. Absolutely. If you're a news junkie, you probably don't get enough. If you're a classical music fan, our 31 hours a week is not enough. It's a compromise position that to date has worked, to date has been, I think, fairly successful. And what I take out of your comments are, it may not continue to be the model that we have to continue in the future. I think we have to look for ways, whether it's being a conduit, whether it's additional services, whether it's being more available, whether it's other streams and other ways of getting content delivered in the future. Absolutely, I think we got to keep looking at that. And I also think that just because we've done something forever doesn't mean we need to leave it. You know, one of the things we heard at our listener meetings last fall was, don't be afraid to change programs, move things around. I dropped Mountain Stage. Got a lot of calls, got a lot of happy people, got a lot of people that were like, that was my favorite program. So I'm looking at ways, I think, to think about that question, and I think we'll take certainly your comments very seriously, and there's probably others and go in both directions. Who's got the mic?
Yeah.
And
Yeah, it's clear that the technology is changing rapidly, as you said, and it's continuing to change rapidly. And a lot of these issues, whether it's attracting a younger audience or whether it's trying to shoehorn 50 hours worth of programming into 24, or whether it's wanting to satisfy people who want to listen to news now when they wake up rather than when it's actually scheduled. A lot of those answers seem to be, the answers to those, I think, are in web development. And I want to know now, are you able to track who's visiting the website? Are you able to kind of find out who's visiting the website and what kind of plans do you have? Because a lot of these issues seem to be, could be addressed through better web development.
I agree with you, and I think our current web statistics reflect the fact that our site has problems and deficits. So yes, we are able to track to a certain extent the visitation to our site and the use of our site. It's not getting used a lot, and I think that's because, you know, what people are looking for is not there yet, or it's too hard to find, and that's why we're looking at upgrading the website as one of our priorities.
I'm very heartened by what I hear about your future plans to expand services, but I also wanted to report that my husband and I recently spent 5 years in the Seattle area. We had to hop around from 4 different stations on a daily basis to even begin to get what KUFM gave us consistently over the years. We missed KUFM terribly and are very, very happy to be back and hearing this. And it was interesting during their several times a year fund drives how desperately they had to struggle with that huge population and a much higher economic status in the community to get money to run their stations. They did not have the kind of loyalty. I'd love to hear how many individual people contribute over our 1 week period.
It's somewhere between 5,000 and 5,500, depends on the year. But
there were a lot of hands up. Can we pass the mic to somebody?
Hi, just a couple of things. I want to note that one of the real rich aspects of Montana Public Radio, for me and for many friends who come in from around the country who listen to it, who have had experiences with other public radio stations, many of which are streamlining in kind of corporate model ways that are no longer reflecting local or regional voices particularly well. They have a lot of kudos to offer to Montana Public Radio for keeping that kind of eclectic mix. And the music, and I'm thinking not only of classical music or of jazz, but the kind of stuff that Joan Richard and John Myers do, which is everything from rock to folk to all of that. How refreshing it is to hear music that isn't just a canned list, a computer-generated list of stuff, to hear that kind of intelligent commentary. And I think there's room for growth in that kind of area too. I think we need stuff for the head and for the heart and for the spirit, and that a lot of that music programming is quite imaginative and very strong. The other thing I want to say is, I think it seems clear that Montana Public Radio is going through a cultural change on the technology front, especially with new media and web development. And what I'm hearing is, we're not there yet, but that you're moving in a thoughtful and studied and steady way to try to get there. So I just want to express appreciation, because that kind of cultural change on a very limited budget is not easy, but it's thrilling to hear how much progress is being made and envisioned. So thanks, guys.
I have sort of a mixed kind of question. One, as a consumer, I'm inundated with pledging and support for the radio station, and yet as a person who has a major grant on this campus, I can't give my money to you. And I've tried several different times in several different programming sections, and I get no response. And so 20 years ago, I turned off my television and turned on KUFM radio and have not left and intend to stay. But I have money, many thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars to offer you, but I don't get a phone call back. So who do I talk to?
I'd be happy to talk to you about that.
Okay.
Yeah, and I apologize if we have not been responsive to you.
Yeah, I mean, seriously.
Mm-hmm.
And I had, grant funding from the National Science Foundation to do science infrastructure building. Our program was Science is Cool with Dr. Katie, and we do the Spectrum Discovery Area, which I think many people are beginning to understand. And we can build programming, we can give you people, and so let us help promote you.
Thank you.
I have one small comment. I've been a devotee of classical and jazz and folk music all my life, and I love what you put on the radio. But I, too, I am a 70-something, not a 20-something. And when I get up in the morning and by the time I've walked my dog, I'm facing 4 hours of music until noon. And I really would like to see that shuffled around somehow, because I like to hear voices telling me about what's going on in the world in the morning. Thanks.
We pass that back.
Oh, far back.
I just want to make the comment that I think it's very inspirational that William Marcus is on Monday mornings. I think it's great that you take that on yourselves as a Monday morning thing to do, and I look forward to hearing your voice each Monday morning. I wish that there was actually less news, because I would like to see more comedy. And I tell you, when I nearly had a cat when you moved the car, guys. In fact, I had to quit my church I'm not kidding. I quit my church so I can listen to the car guys at noon. So they're very spiritual. They're very spiritual, and they're very uplifting. And I think that that's what I like to hear from public radio as well as the news. And I do agree with this fellow over here about bringing the BBC on during a decent hour during the day so that we can get a little more international flair to what we listen to. And I love our local shows. They're just great. So thank you for the work that you do. I'm not going to address the technology because it's just beyond me, and I know you guys will get it right.
Back there, Susan.
I'll take some back here.
Thanks. I hear from a lot of my friends, particularly a lot of friends that are very concerned about the fact that KUFM doesn't, or Montana Public Radio doesn't have Democracy Now! And one thing that I've tried to share with them, and I just wanted to say tonight, is I think it is very important. There's a lot of incredible programming out there. But there's a danger in trying to promote that as, well, the people out there need it. Whenever we try to force something onto the listening public, the tendency is it is trying to force it, and it's not really working. It's assuming that other people don't have the information they need. The more we can do to try to encourage people to listen, to come to Montana Public Radio, the more that which they hear will be more effective. Because they're coming to it rather than having it, the idea that it needs to be forced upon them. I'm not really articulating that the way I really would like to, but there's something there that I'm trying to convey. And related to that, when Michael mentioned that taking Mountain Stage off the air, and switching to, I was a big fan of Mountain Stage, and my heart kind of dropped when I realized it wasn't on anymore. And then I heard the American Roots, and I feel like that is one of the most incredible additions to the radio program. Not just listening to music, but that exploration of what's behind the music, and that's the kind of thing that I think is really unique to public radio. There are so many sources for news analysis, but these things that really kind of go beyond just what's happening in the world, but are a part of who we are as human beings, I think are incredibly important. So I applaud you all for bringing that to Montana Public Radio.
Would having a second station double the cost or only add X percent?
Well, there would obviously be a lot of cost with the second station. I mean, what a number of stations are doing out there is they're putting various kinds of streams, all classical music, all news talk programming, without as many people involved, automated in some ways on those second stations. But there are also experiments happening all over the country with the second stations. In Cincinnati, they took an alternative college web-only radio station playing really alternative things and put that on the second channel of the public station and had quite a bit of success with it. I think there's experiments happening all over with content. There would obviously be expense, and as I mentioned earlier, William wasn't here for that, but he always has been mentioning at these meetings that we do have that new HD transmitter in Missoula, but we don't have it to be able to do system-wide, which is really an issue, both with expense and what it would allow us in terms of being able to deliver content to everybody that listens. So, yeah, there's a lot to think about. I mean, to think about being able to program another 168 hours of content is pretty fun, but it's also pretty daunting. The way HD radio works is it's actually like similar to high definition television, where it's actually a digital signal instead of an analog signal. And as part of HD, there's multiple channels possible within the frequency. So, for example, you have to have an HD radio, so you have to buy a new radio. Or if you have 9 radios, you have to buy 9 new radios. And then you turn to the HD2, and so you'd go to KUFM 89.1 and you go to the second channel and you would get a whole nother stream of content, and up to multiple streams. There's also questions with the technology, too many channels, so I think it's, in some ways it's a bit untested technology. 4 or 5 years ago, everybody was saying Sirius Radio and XM was going to kill us. And we used to be just radio. Now we're called terrestrial radio. Terrestrial radio was going to be in trouble because of satellite radio, and it's a compliment. I think one of the things that I think was Tom said earlier is that as it expands more and more, I think what's going to be important is that we can help educate people how to get what they want. If you don't want to quit your church to listen to Car Talk, how do you get the content that you want at the time you want it? And maybe we can help with that. So, who's got the mic?
I've got the mic. Who's got the question?
Who's got the question?
Thank you. I just have a quick access question. As I drive around Montana, is there a way that I could dial into just one station and listen all the way to Helena, well, except for that little interruption spot, all the way to Dillon, all the way to where Bozeman?
No. Sometimes that's one of the advantages of satellite radio is that you can go and get a stream that'll follow your car through a lot of areas, and that's the nature of the terrain of Montana for broadcast. The same frequency in every location? No. But what we can do is we can give you a nice little postcard and a map and a little booklet that gets all the public radio stations all over the country, so you can follow it wherever you go. So.
Yeah, plus, we wouldn't be able to read all those numbers every hour.
Can I give you the mic since we're taping? Thank you.
To the gentleman in the back, I did not want to force feed anyone, on the flathead. I might want to, but I wouldn't think of doing that. But I forgot what I was going to say. Oh, God. I can't remember.
Okay. More questions? Anything?
Oh, I want to just say this about Diane Rehm. She interviews people. And, I mean, it's incredible, the people that she has access to that come to her studio. And Montana has the highest rate of suicide of any state in the nation. In fact, it's twice as high as the average. And Diane Rehm often interviews people that have written books about mental illness and things. So it's not just a news show. It's very informative.
Thank you. Certainly we'll take a few more questions. I do want to mention before we break, though, that we've all put our business cards on the table. We also have quarter notes and other things. I certainly, we all will welcome further contact. Feel free to pick up the phone, send an email, let us know your feedback. If you have a neighbor like this gentleman did who wants to relay something, tell him just to let us know. We really appreciate the feedback, and thank everybody for coming. Any final questions? Take one of these sheets if you want to do a legal ID or know somebody would on the way out as well. And thank you all very, very much.
Nice to see you guys. Did you guys drive down?
Yeah, and I'm curious.